The growling came from everywhere and nowhere. Margaret Wellington's Hermes boots sank into blood-stained snow as amber eyes materialized in the frozen mist, dozens, then hundreds, forming an inescapable circle. Her hired hunters, Grant and Shane, stood paralyzed, rifles trembling in their grip. "Mrs. Wellington," Grant's voice cracked, "these aren't normal wolves." From the white void, a figure emerged barefoot, draped in tattered furs, moving with inhuman grace among the predators. The young woman's scarred arms bore strange marks, her wild hair framing a face both feral and hauntingly familiar. She touched the massive alpha wolf beside her, and the beast's growl softened to a rumble. Margaret's designer glove flew to her mouth. Those green eyes, she knew those eyes. "Lena." The word escaped as a whisper. "But you're dead." I made sure. The young woman's hand rose, revealing something that made Margaret's blood freeze. Her late husband David's wedding ring, caked with 15-year-old dirt, hanging from a leather cord around the girl's neck. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. The wedding ring swayed like a pendulum of judgment. "Impossible." Margaret stumbled backward, her breath forming desperate clouds in the -20 air. "The search teams found nothing. The police declared you—" The wild woman tilted her head, studying Margaret with the patient focus of a predator evaluating prey. Not a single word escaped her lips, but her green eyes burned with 15 years of accumulated memory. Each scar on her exposed arms told a story, curved marks that should have been wounds from attacks, yet they seemed almost protective, ceremonial. The alpha wolf beside her was magnificent and terrifying, 3 times the size of any normal wolf, his gray-black fur streaked with battle scars. His missing left eye had healed into a mass of twisted tissue, but his remaining eye held an intelligence that transcended animal instinct. When the girl's fingers brushed his massive head, he leaned into her touch with devastating gentleness. "Shoot her!" Margaret shrieked at her hunters. "She's rabid feral. She'll kill us all." Grant raised his rifle, crosshairs finding the girl's chest. His finger touched the trigger. The girl didn't flinch. Instead, her hands began moving in fluid patterns, sign language, but corrupted somehow, evolved into something between human communication and animal body language. The wolves responded instantly, their formation shifting like a military unit receiving orders. Shane lowered his weapon, face draining of color. "Mrs. Wellington, what did you do to this kid? That thing isn't human anymore." Margaret reached for Grant's sidearm. "It needs to be put down." The girl's scarred throat convulsed as if fighting to remember speech. Her mouth opened, shaped words that produced no sound, but every wolf understood. The pack began closing in, their circle tightening with synchronized precision. Tucker's voice crackled over Margaret's radio, the government wildlife controller she'd called for backup. "Wellington, I'm 5 minutes out with tranquilizers. Whatever you do, don't provoke." The girl suddenly moved, faster than humanly possible. Snatching the radio from Margaret's belt, she studied it with curious intensity, then pressed the talk button. What came through the speaker wasn't words, but a sound that made every human present instinctively recoil, a perfect wolf's howl, somehow produced by human vocal cords. Answering howls erupted from the forest. Not dozens, hundreds. Margaret's designer coat couldn't stop her violent shivering. "What have you become?" The girl dropped the radio into the snow and finally pointed not at Margaret, but at something behind her. Margaret spun around. A wall of wolves stood behind her, their breath forming a curtain of mist in the frozen air. These weren't part of the original circle. They'd arrived silently, cutting off every escape route. Grant and Shane pressed back to back, rifles swinging wildly between targets. "How many?" Shane's voice broke like a teenager's. 200. Maybe more." Grant's military training kept his voice steady, but sweat beaded his forehead despite the Arctic cold. "Mrs. Wellington, what the hell did you drag us into?" The girl Lena moved through the pack like water through rocks. Each wolf she passed lowered its head in deference, not submission, respect. She stopped before a scarred female wolf nursing 3 pups despite the danger. "Luna, though Margaret couldn't know that name. The mother wolf whimpered something that sounded almost like language, and Lena's hands responded in her strange hybrid signing. Margaret's Cartier watch beeped 4 p.m. Sunset in these Montana mountains came early in December. In 30 minutes, they'd be in complete darkness with hundreds of wolves. The treasure, Margaret spoke loudly, desperately. Your father's gold mine. I know where it is. I can make you rich. Lena's head snapped toward her, and for the first time, emotion cracked across her feral features. But it wasn't greed or interest, it was disgust. She signed something sharp and aggressive. The alpha wolf beside her frost bared teeth like white daggers. The radio crackled. Wellington, this is Tucker. I'm at your GPS coordinates, but... Jesus Christ. Are those all wolves I'm calling for backup? No! Margaret lunged for the radio Lena had dropped. Just get here with the tranquilizers. But as her manicured fingers touched the device, a young wolf barely more than a pup darted forward and snatched it in his jaws. He brought it to Lena like a dog playing fetch. She examined the wolf's face with maternal concern, touching a fresh wound on his muzzle. Her eyes flicked to Shane's rifle, noting the blood on the barrel's edge. The temperature in her gaze dropped below the Montana winter. Look, Grant tried diplomacy. Nobody else needs to get hurt. We'll leave. Right now. Won't say a word about... Lena's hand slashed through the air. Silence fell so completely that they could hear snowflakes landing. She approached Margaret slowly, each footstep deliberate despite the frozen ground that should have been agony on bare feet. When she stood mere inches away, Margaret could see the full extent of what 15 years in the wilderness had created. This wasn't the mute 6-year-old she'd abandoned. This was something evolved, something that had learned to survive in ways that violated the boundary between human and animal. The scars weren't random, they formed patterns, almost like a history written in flesh. And her eyes. God, those eyes held memories that no human should carry. Lena reached into the furs wrapped around her body and withdrew something that made Margaret's knees buckle. A Polaroid photograph. Weathered and faded but still recognizable David Wellington holding baby Lena at the hospital. His face glowing with new father joy. The same photo Margaret had torn from Lena's hands before driving her into the wilderness to die. But this copy was different, covered in brownish stains that looked suspiciously like dried blood, and in the corner, barely visible. Someone had written in childish handwriting, "Daddy said wolves protect family." The sound of approaching helicopters thundered through the valley. Tucker and his team, coming to save them from the rabid pack. Lena's scarred throat worked again, and this time, a single word escaped raw, broken, but unmistakably human. Choose. 15 years earlier, December 19th, 2009. 6-year-old Lena Wellington pressed her small face against the frosted window of Margaret's black Mercedes, watching the Montana wilderness blur past in whites and grays. Her hands stayed folded in her lap. She'd learned not to touch anything in Margaret's car. The leather seats still smelled like the accident that killed Daddy 6 months ago. Margaret glanced in the rearview mirror, checking her lipstick rather than her stepdaughter. Stop breathing on the glass, dear. It leaves marks. Lena pulled back, signing sorry in the air, a reflex from when Daddy was alive. He'd taught her sign language when the trauma counselors said her voice might never return after witnessing the crash. Margaret never bothered learning what the hand movements meant. We're going to Daddy's special cabin, Margaret announced with false cheer that didn't reach her calculating eyes. For Christmas. Won't that be fun? The child nodded, though something felt wrong. Margaret had sold Daddy's cabin 3 months ago. Lena had watched men carry out his furniture, including the rocking chair where he'd read her stories. But pointing out adult mistakes only brought punishment. The Mercedes climbed higher into the mountains, far from any cabin Lena remembered. Snow began falling harder, transforming from pretty flakes into a white wall that consumed everything. The car's heater hummed, but cold seemed to seep through the windows anyway. Drink your cocoa, Margaret commanded, indicating the thermos she'd prepared. It'll keep you warm. Lena obediently sipped the too-sweet chocolate. It tasted wrong metallic, like the medicine Dr. Harrison gave her for sleep. Her eyelids immediately grew heavy, but she fought to stay awake. Daddy always said to stay alert in the mountains. Margaret watched in the mirror, counting under her breath. 30, 29, 28. The empty thermos slipped from Lena's fingers. Her green eyes, David's eyes, fluttered closed as her small body went limp against the seatbelt. Margaret's painted lips curved into something that couldn't quite be called a smile. Finally, the Mercedes stopped at mile marker 47 exactly as planned. No cameras this far into the wilderness, no witnesses. The nearest house was 18 miles back. Margaret had scouted this location 3 times, ensuring it met her requirements remote enough that the body would never be found, harsh enough that death would come quickly. She wasn't a complete monster. She didn't want the child to suffer long. She dragged Lena's unconscious form from the back seat, struggling with the dead weight. The designer gloves she wore would leave no fingerprints, and she'd burn them later anyway. The snowbank beside the abandoned logging road was perfect, deep enough to hide a small body, exposed enough that hypothermia would claim her within hours. Your father's will was very specific, Margaret explained to the unconscious child, as if justifying herself to the universe. You inherit everything at 18, or it passes to your guardian if you die after age 7. Such a shame you wandered off just 2 weeks before your 7th birthday. She positioned Lena carefully in the snow, arranging her to look like she'd simply laid down to rest. The girl's raven hair spread across the white like spilled ink. Her tiny hands, still bearing the adhesive marks from the hospital monitors after the car accident, curled instinctively toward her chest. Margaret stood, brushing snow from her coat. Movement in the tree line caught her eye, a pair of amber lights watching through the blizzard. Just a deer, probably. Or a mountain cat. Either way, nature would handle the evidence. She returned to the Mercedes, cranking the heat to maximum. In 12 hours, she'd report Lena missing from the family cabin. In 48 hours, search teams would comb the wrong sections of forest. In 2 weeks, a judge would declare Lena legally dead. The Wellington fortune, $17 million in assets and 3,000 acres of mineral-rich land, would transfer entirely to the grieving stepmother. Margaret executed a careful 3-point turn on the narrow road. As the Mercedes taillights disappeared into the blizzard, those amber lights moved closer to the small form in the snow. They weren't deer eyes. The amber eyes belonged to a wolf larger than any recorded in Montana's wildlife registry. His gray-black coat bore the scars of 100 battles, his left eye a ruined socket from a grizzly's claw. He approached the small form in the snow with cautious steps, each paw print larger than the child's head. Frost, though he had no name yet, had watched the Mercedes from the ridge. 20 winters had taught him to recognize human cruelty. The female had carried the pup away from the metal den and left her to freeze. Not for food, not for territory, just abandonment. The child's breathing was shallow, crystallizing in tiny puffs that grew weaker with each exhale. Her lips had turned blue, fingers already showing the purple-black of Frostbite's first kiss. Death would claim her within the hour. Frost circled twice, instincts warring. Humans were danger. Their thundersticks killed his mate 3 seasons ago. Their wire teeth traps had claimed 2 of his sons. But this pup was different, broken like him. Abandoned like the wolf cubs humans sometimes left after killing their mothers for pelts. He lowered his massive head, nostrils flaring, beneath the chemical smell from the drink, beneath the fear, sweat, and sickness. He detected something else. Innocence. Pain that matched his own. The scent of a creature that had never harmed anything. A soft whine escaped his scarred throat. The storm was worsening. If he left her, she'd join the frozen dead that spring would reveal. If he helped her... Frost had never seen a wolf pack adopt human young, but he'd never seen a human pup abandoned in winter either. The natural order had already been violated. Perhaps it was time for nature to respond in kind. He pressed his body against hers, sharing what warmth remained in his thick coat. The child stirred slightly, unconscious fingers tangling in his fur. Her body temperature was dropping dangerously, but she still lived. Barely. 3 howls short. Long, Short summoned his pack. Luna arrived first, heavily pregnant with her third litter. She evaluated the situation with intelligent yellow eyes, then began licking the child's frozen face, her rough tongue restoring circulation. The younger wolves formed a protective circle, their bodies creating a living furnace against the killing cold. Echo, barely a yearling, dragged over a deer hide from their last kill, and Frost used his teeth to wrap it around the child. They couldn't move her far. Her body was too fragile, but the abandoned bear cave 50 yards into the tree line would shelter them from the worst of the storm. Together, taking infinite care, the pack carried Lena to safety. December 20th, 2009. Wellington Estate. Margaret stood before her bathroom mirror, practicing devastation. She was right there. She sobbed experimentally, watching tears streak her carefully applied mascara. I only looked away for a moment. Perfect. The performance would convince anyone. She'd waited exactly 14 hours, long enough for hypothermia to guarantee death, short enough to seem like a panicked mother who'd searched alone before calling for help. The 911 call needed to sound desperate but not rehearsed. Emergency services, what's your... My daughter. Margaret's voice cracked expertly. She wandered off at our cabin. I can't find her anywhere. Please, she's only 6, and she can't speak, she's mute. The dispatcher's tone shifted to urgent concern. Ma'am, what's your location? Margaret gave the address of David's old cabin 12 miles from where she'd actually left Lena. The search would center on entirely the wrong area. Within hours, the mountain swarmed with rescue teams. Sheriff Coleman personally led the search. Knowing the Wellington family's influence in the state, helicopters thundered overhead while tracking dogs sniffed for trails that didn't exist. She was wearing a pink coat, Margaret told the search coordinator, though Lena had worn blue. She loves to follow rabbits. Maybe she saw one and... She let herself break down, accepting comfort from strangers who'd never suspect a mother could murder her own child. 3 days passed. The search expanded, but in the wrong direction, further from Lena's actual location. Margaret played her role flawlessly, the desperate mother, the grieving widow now facing another loss. Local news picked up the story. Mute girl missing in Montana mountains. Dr. Carter, David's old lawyer, arrived on day 4. Margaret, I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do? Just pray they find her, Margaret whispered, knowing they never would. On day 7, Sheriff Coleman delivered the expected news. Mrs. Wellington, the storm that night, the temperature dropped to -30. No child could survive that long. We're shifting from rescue to recovery. You're giving up. Margaret's outrage was Oscar-worthy. We'll keep looking, but you need to prepare yourself after a week in these conditions. Margaret collapsed into a chair, covering her face. Through her fingers, she watched Dr. Carter make notes. The legal wheels would start turning soon. By New Year's Eve, she'd be $17 million richer. December 26th, 2009. The Wolf Cave. Lena's eyes fluttered open to impossible warmth and the sound of breathing that wasn't her own. Massive forms surrounded her, their fur pressing against her body from all sides. Yellow eyes watched her wake, curious but unthreatening. She should have screamed. Any child would have. But Lena had lost her voice the night Daddy died, and these creatures had given her something no human had since safety. Her fingers, miraculously still intact despite the frostbite's attempt, touched the nearest wolf's muzzle. Luna didn't pull away. Instead, she made a soft rumbling sound and brought something in her jaws, a rabbit, freshly killed, its body still warm. Why, the child who'd eaten from crystal plates in the Wellington mansion understood instinctively what was being offered, and not just food. Acceptance, family. A contract written in blood and survival rather than words. Lena bit into the raw meat, her body desperate for any calories to fight the cold still trying to claim her. The pack watched approvingly. She was learning the first law of the wild: survive first. Question later. Frost entered the cave, dragging something that made Lena's heart race, her pink backpack, somehow retrieved from Margaret's car. Inside, the Polaroid of her and Daddy, her seizure medication that she'd need to survive, and most importantly, a piece of paper she couldn't read yet but would treasure forever. It was Daddy's handwritten will, the real one, hidden in the backpack's lining. If anything happens to me. And then to Lena before she turns 18. I want the authorities to know Margaret should be investigated. I've hidden cameras in the house. Check them. Protect my daughter. But 7-year-old Lena couldn't read these words. She only knew the wolves had given her a gift. She pressed the paper to her chest and made a sound she hadn't made since the accident, not quite human, not quite wolf, but something in between. A howl of gratitude that echoed through the cave and into the night, reaching the ears of someone unexpected. Dr. Carter, searching the wrong area 12 miles away, heard that sound and stopped cold. He'd been at enough wilderness rescues to know that wasn't any wolf he'd ever heard. December 27th, 2009. Search Headquarters. Dr. Carter couldn't shake the sound from his mind. He'd been practicing law in Montana for 30 years, handled dozens of wilderness cases. Wolves didn't sound like that. Neither did humans. Sheriff Coleman. He pulled the exhausted lawman aside. I need to expand the search grid. Doctor, we've covered everything within a 15-mile radius of the cabin. The girl couldn't have walked farther than... What if she didn't walk? What if Margaret drove her somewhere else? Coleman's weathered face darkened. That's a serious accusation. David Wellington was my best friend. He installed security cameras throughout that house after the first accident with Margaret. Cameras she doesn't know about. The sheriff studied the lawyer's face. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about checking every possibility. Give me 12 hours and a small team. Let me search the logging roads, the ones Margaret would know from the land surveys. Coleman hesitated, then nodded. Take Deputies Harris and Chen. But Carter, if you're wrong about this, then a little girl is still dead. But if I'm right, she might still be alive. December 28th, 2009. The Cave. Lena's 7th birthday arrived without cake or candles, but with something far more precious: acceptance into the pack's hierarchy. The wolves had spent 2 days teaching her their law through patience and repetition. Luna showed her which berries wouldn't poison her, crushing the safe ones between her teeth and offering them from her mouth like a mother bird. Echo, young and playful, taught her to read tracks in the snow. Rabbit meant easy prey. Elk meant danger from hooves. Bear meant run. But it was Frost who gave her the most important lesson. The massive alpha brought her to a frozen stream, ice thick enough to support their weight. He stared at their reflection until she understood she wasn't human anymore. Couldn't be. Humans had thrown her away. But here, in this reflection, she saw Truth, a girl creature with tangled hair and wild eyes, standing beside a scarred wolf, both survivors of human cruelty. Her fingers traced signs in the air. Thank you, but Frost didn't understand. So she tried something different. She tilted her head back and released a sound from her damaged throat. A keening wail that spoke of grief and gratitude combined. The pack responded immediately, their voices joining hers in a harmony that seemed to reshape her very bones. Her vocal cords, silent for 6 months, remembered their purpose but forgot their human limitations. The howl she produced wasn't quite wolf, wasn't quite human, but something entirely new. 20 miles away, Margaret was meeting with banker Mr. Fitzgerald to discuss accessing David's accounts. Once Lena is declared legally dead, that requires a body, Mrs. Wellington, or a judge's ruling after sufficient time has passed. How much time? In cases involving children, minimum 30 days if no remains are found. Margaret smiled. 23 days to go. December 30th, 2009. Mile marker 47. Dr. Carter's flashlight swept across the abandoned logging road. The snow had covered everything, but something felt wrong about this place. Too convenient. Too perfect for disposing of evidence. Sir, Deputy Chen called out, her voice tight. I've got something. Tire tracks, preserved under a fallen pine branch. Deep impressions from a heavy vehicle making a three-point turn, the same width as Margaret's Mercedes. Carter knelt beside them, his lawyer's mind constructing the narrative. She stopped here, turned around here. His light tracked to the snowbank. And if I wanted to leave something I never wanted found. They dug carefully, archaeologists of a potential crime. 3 feet down, Chen's shovel hit something. Not a body fabric. A child's blue winter coat. The one Lena was actually wearing, not the pink one Margaret had described. Jesus Christ, Harris whispered. She lied about everything. But where was the body? Carter stood, scanning the tree line. Those strange tracks leading away from the burial site too large for any dog, arranged in a pattern that suggested coordination rather than random movement. The wolves took her, Coleman said, joining them at the scene. Probably scattered the remains for miles. We'll never find enough to prove. A howl cut through his words. Then another. Then dozens, surrounding them in the darkness. The search team formed a defensive circle, hands on weapons. But the howls weren't threatening. They sounded almost mournful. Questioning from the trees. A single wolf emerged, massive, scarred, one-eyed. Frost stood at the forest's edge, evaluating these new humans. In his jaws, he carried something that made Carter's heart stop. Lena's seizure medication bottle, clearly labeled with her name and the Wellington pharmacy information. The prescription dated 1 week ago after she'd supposedly died. That's impossible, Coleman breathed. Wolves don't. Frost set the bottle in the snow and retreated 3 steps, maintaining eye contact with Carter. The message was clear. She lives. Carter took 1 step forward. Lena, if you can hear me, I'm a friend. I knew your daddy. I want to help. The forest erupted in movement. Not wolves fleeing, but something running toward them. A small figure burst from the undergrowth, more animal than child in her movements, wrapped in deer hide and covered in dirt. Lena stopped just beyond the reach of their lights, crouched low, eyes reflecting green in the darkness. She was alive, feral, changed, but breathing. Carter's eyes filled with tears. Dear God. Lena, it's okay. We're here to take you home. The child's reaction was immediate and violent. She scrambled backward, releasing a sound that no human throat should make a perfect wolf's warning growl. Frost and his pack moved closer, protecting what they now considered theirs. She doesn't want to come, Chen said softly. Look at her. She's choosing them. The Mexican standoff lasted 30 seconds. Then Lena did something unexpected. She signed rough, unpracticed, but recognizable to Carter, who'd seen David do it 1,000 times. Safe here, dangerous there. Before anyone could respond, she melted back into the forest. The wolves followed, but Frost remained 1 moment longer. He looked directly at Carter and did something wolves never do. He nodded, once, deliberately, then vanished. Coleman's radio crackled to life. It was headquarters, and the news changed everything. Sheriff, Margaret Wellington just filed for immediate declaration of death. She's got a judge ready to sign. December 19th, 2009 hour, 1 after abandonment. The cold had teeth. 6-year-old Lena Wellington crawled through snow that swallowed her arms to the elbows, each movement slower than the last. The drugs in Margaret's cocoa still clouded her mind, making the white world spin and tilt. Her frozen fingers found a rock face, not shelter, but a shallow depression that might block the wind. She pressed against the stone, knees drawn to her chest. Daddy's voice echoed in her memory. If you're ever lost, stay put. I'll find you. I promise. But Daddy was in the ground now, in a box that Margaret wouldn't let her see. He couldn't keep promises anymore. Her small body shook violently, not shivering, but the bone-deep convulsions that preceded hypothermic shutdown, the pink mittens Margaret had given her were already stiff with ice. She tried to sign help into the air, but her fingers wouldn't separate. They'd become a single frozen mass, purple-black at the tips. Don't sleep. Daddy had warned her about winter. Sleep means forever, but her eyelids weighed more than mountains. Each blink lasted longer. The pain in her extremities faded to numbness, then to nothing, almost peaceful, like the morphine they'd given Daddy in the hospital before he stopped breathing. Through her closing eyes, she saw lights. Not rescue lights, amber, floating in pairs through the blizzard. Eyes, watching, waiting. Death had come to collect her, just like it collected Daddy. But death had amber eyes, not black. That seemed wrong, but thinking hurt too much. Her body made the choice her mind couldn't, shutting down non-essential systems, pooling the last warm blood around her heart and brain. Her breathing slowed to 3 times per minute. Her pulse dropped to 20. Medical science would call it profound hypothermia. The wolves called it the edge of crossing over. Frost had been watching for 20 minutes. His pack hung back, uncertain. They'd seen him observe dying creatures before, elk with broken legs, rabbits caught in ice. Nature demanded non-interference. The weak fed the strong. This was the law. But the human pup wasn't dying from age or disease or honorable battle. She'd been discarded like the toxic waste humans dumped in streams, poisonous, unnatural, wrong. The female who'd carried her here had violated something fundamental. Luna pressed against his flank, communicating through touch and scent. Her pregnancy made her protective of all young things. She'd lost 2 pups to human traps last winter, and something in this abandoned child's scent reminded her of that loss. Innocent suffering caused by human cruelty. Echo whined, pawing at the snow. The yearling had never seen human young before. His curiosity overwhelmed his caution. Why didn't the pup get up? Why didn't her pack come for her? Frost made his decision not from mercy, but from justice. If humans could break nature's law by abandoning their young, perhaps wolves could break it by saving them. He approached slowly, each step deliberate. The child's eyes had closed completely now, her body still except for the faintest rise and fall of her chest. Her scent told him everything: fear chemicals, sadness hormones. But underneath, something else. The smell of a creature that had never harmed anything, never taken joy in another's pain. His scarred muzzle touched her frozen cheek. No response. He pushed harder, trying to wake her. Nothing. Her skin felt like river stones in winter smooth, cold, lifeless, but not dead. Not yet. The bite saved her life. Frost's teeth closed gently on the thick collar of her coat, lifting her 12-pound body as easily as he'd carry a newborn pup. The sudden movement forced blood through her sluggish veins, keeping her heart rhythm from flatting completely. The pack followed him deeper into the forest, away from the road where humans might search. Their paws found ancient paths invisible under snow, routes carved by 1,000 generations of hunters. They moved like gray ghosts through white darkness, the only sound their synchronized breathing. The cave hadn't been used since the bear that claimed it died 3 winters past. It cut deep into the mountain, naturally insulated, the back chamber maintaining a constant 40 degrees even in the worst storms. Bones of old kills littered the entrance: rabbit, deer, the occasional elk. But the deepest chamber was clean, dry, protected. Frost set the child down on a bed of pine needles that previous occupants had gathered. She curled into herself immediately, a reflex of all dying things to protect their center. Her lips had turned blue-black. Her breathing barely moved the deer hide covering her chest. Luna knew what to do. She'd saved frozen pups before, though never a human one. She began licking the child's face with her rough tongue, stimulating circulation, forcing blood back to the surface. The other females joined her, their tongues working on hands and feet, patient and thorough as they'd groom their own young. Echo dragged in pine branches, creating insulation. The younger males brought fur from recent kills, rabbit pelts still soft, a deer hide barely frozen. They understood instinctively warmth was life, but it was Frost who gave the most. The alpha wolf did something that would have made wildlife biologists rewrite textbooks. He lay down beside the dying child and pulled her against his body, her back to his chest, his massive frame curling around her like a living furnace. His body temperature, 102 degrees Fahrenheit, began transferring through her wet clothes. His thick fur trapped the heat, creating a microclimate of survival. Luna pressed against Lena's front, sandwiching the child between two living heaters. Echo curled at her feet. The entire pack formed layers around them, 16 wolves creating a breathing, warm cave within a cave. Their combined body heat raised the temperature around Lena to nearly 90 degrees. For 3 hours, they held this position, not moving when their muscles cramped, not leaving when hunger gnawed. They'd made a choice that violated every evolutionary instinct, saving a predator species' offspring, and they committed fully. Around hour 4, Lena's body performed its own miracle. Her core temperature rose 1 degree, then 2. Blood began flowing to her extremities again, bringing agony that made her whimper. The sound was so small, so broken, that it triggered every maternal instinct in the pack. Luna began making soft rumbling sounds, wolf lullabies, while the others adjusted their positions to share more heat. Lena's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. She should have screamed. Any child surrounded by predators would have. But something in her recognized what they'd done. These monsters with teeth like knives had chosen to save her when her own kind had chosen to kill her. Her frozen hand, barely functional, reached out and touched Frost's scarred muzzle. He didn't pull away. Instead, he exhaled warm breath across her palm. And in that moment, a contract was signed without words. She was packed now, whatever that meant, whatever that required. She belonged to them, and they to her. December 20th, 2009. Dawn. Margaret stood at her bedroom window, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. Somewhere out there, Lena's body was freezing solid, becoming part of the landscape. By spring, scattered bones would be all that remained, unidentifiable, untraceable. She lifted her coffee Italian roast, $200 a pound, and smiled. The search parties would launch soon, heading in the wrong direction. She'd play the grieving mother perfectly. In a month, she'd be rich. In a year, she'd sell this mountain prison and move to Miami. Her phone buzzed. Dr. Carter, again. She let it go to voicemail. Margaret, I need to discuss David's estate planning. There are some documents that require immediate attention, papers that David filed separately. Please call me back. She deleted the message. Whatever David had hidden wouldn't matter once Lena was declared dead. The primary heir gone meant everything defaulted to the surviving guardian. Simple, clean, legal. Outside, a wolf howled long, mournful, different somehow. Margaret didn't understand wolf language. If she had, she would have recognized it for what it was, a birth announcement. The pack had just adopted a new member. Present day, December 2024. Choose. The word hung in the frozen air like a blade. Margaret stared at the wild woman who'd once been her stepdaughter, unable to process the impossibility. 15 years of carefully constructed lies crumbled at the sight of those green eyes, David's eyes still alive, still watching, still knowing. You should be dead, Margaret whispered, her Hermes coat suddenly insufficient against a cold that had nothing to do with weather. Lena tilted her head, studying Margaret the way Frost had once studied her, a predator evaluating something that might be prey or might be nothing at all. Her scarred fingers moved in fluid signs that Margaret had never bothered to learn. But the wolves understood. They always understood. Echo, young and eager to please his alpha's chosen daughter, began moving. The gray wolf circled Margaret, his body lowering, tail tucking, eyes rolling back in exaggerated fear. He cowered, whimpering, pawing at the ground. Then he lay down, playing dead in the snow, his tongue lolling out dramatically. What's he doing? Grant kept his rifle raised, but his hands shook. Shane understood first. His military background included K-9 unit training, and he'd seen dogs reenact trauma before. He's Christ, he's showing us something. The rifle slipped from his fingers. Mrs. Wellington, he's showing us what you did. Echo continued his performance. He struggled to rise, stumbling, falling again. His movements became smaller, weaker, until he curled into a tight ball. The other wolves watched, some whining softly at the display. Then Luna approached, demonstrating the rescue, lifting Echo by his scruff, carrying him away from where Margaret stood. You left a 6-year-old to freeze to death. Shane's voice cracked with disgust. A mute kid who couldn't even call for help. Margaret's hand found the pistol concealed in her coat pocket. You don't understand. She's not human anymore. Look at her. She's an animal, a threat to... Lena moved, not quickly, not threateningly, but with the fluid grace of something that had learned to hunt in absolute silence. She walked between the wolves, her bare feet finding purchase on ice that should have been impossible to navigate. Each wolf she passed lowered its head, not submission, but acknowledgement. She touched each one, fingers brushing scarred heads and battle-torn ears. 16 wolves in the inner circle, each touch a roll call of family. Storm missing half an ear from a trap. River 3 cubs at her side despite the danger. Shadow young, nervous, pressing close to Lena for reassurance. Boulder massive, old, moving stiffly from arthritis but still standing guard. And Frost, the ancient alpha, who positioned himself always between Lena and the guns. There's more coming. Grant's voice pitched high with fear. He'd been counting muzzles in the darkness. Jesus, there must be 300 out there. Tucker's helicopter thundered overhead, searchlight sweeping the scene. His voice crackled over the radio Margaret had dropped. Wildlife control to ground team. Do not engage, repeat. Do not engage. I'm seeing massive pack congregation, calling in federal backup. Margaret snatched the radio with her free hand. No, she's infected them with something. They all need to be put down. Ma'am, that's not how rabies works. Lena's scarred throat convulsed, producing a sound that cut through everything, a whistle so pure and high it seemed to pierce directly into the brain. Every wolf went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. She signed something complex, her hands moving in patterns that incorporated both human ASL and something else. Something learned from 15 years of watching ears and tails communicate mood and meaning. Then she pointed at Margaret and made a gesture that needed no translation, fingers across her throat. She's threatening me. Margaret pulled out the pistol, a pearl-handled Glock that David had bought her for protection before his suspicious accident. Everyone saw that she's threatening my life. But Shane had seen something different. No, she's telling us what you did to her. You cut her out of her life. You killed who she was supposed to be. The temperature was dropping fast. Sunset painted the snow red-orange, making the blood on Frost's muzzle from an earlier hunt look black. In 20 minutes, it would be full dark. No helicopters would fly these mountains at night, too many downdrafts. Too much risk. They'd be alone with hundreds of wolves and a girl who'd forgotten how to be human, but remembered how to hate. The treasure. Margaret played her last card, voice desperate. Your father's gold mine. The real one. Not the played-out claims he sold. I know where it is. 3 million in raw gold, just waiting. I can make you rich. For the first time since the confrontation began, Lena smiled. It was the most terrifying expression Margaret had ever seen, not because it was cruel, but because it was pitying. The kind of smile you'd give a child who didn't understand they were already checkmated 6 moves ago. Lena walked to a specific spot in the clearing and kicked the snow aside with her bare foot. Underneath was a metal marker, a mining claim stake. She kicked another spot 10 feet away. Another stake. Another kick. Another stake. The entire valley was already claimed, had been for years. The stakes were newer than 15 years. Someone had been maintaining the claims, filing the paperwork, keeping the rights active. No, Margaret breathed, understanding flooding her face. You can't. You're dead. Legally dead. You can't own property if you're... Lena reached into the furs wrapped around her body and withdrew a laminated card. Even from a distance, Its official nature was obvious, the seal of Montana, the distinctive format of a state ID. But the name on it made Margaret's knees buckle. Luna Wellington. Not Lena. Luna. A new identity. Legally created. Complete with documentation. How? Margaret's voice broke. From the tree line, an elderly man emerged, Dr. Carter, David's lawyer, now 15 years older but still sharp-eyed. He walked with a cane now, but his voice carried the same authority it had in courtrooms for 40 years. Hello, Margaret. He stood beside Lena numbered Luna, who towered over his bent frame. Did you really think I'd let you get away with it? I've been documenting everything for 15 years. Every forged signature, every bribe, every land sale that violated David's trust provisions. You helped her, you hid her. I helped create a legal identity for a girl who needed protection. Luna Wellington is my legally adopted daughter as of 2010. She inherited her adoptive grandfather's estate when he passed, including these mineral rights that you've been trying to steal. Margaret raised the Glock, pointing it at Lena. She's still feral, still dangerous. I have the right to defend myself. From what? Carter asked calmly. A young woman standing on her own land, surrounded by witnesses while you trespass with armed men. The wolves began closing in, their circle tightening, not attacking, just reducing the space, making the humans cluster together. Grant and Shane stood back to back, but they'd lowered their weapons. They understood who the real predator was here. You can't prove anything about that night, Margaret hissed. It's been 15 years. No evidence. Lena moved her hands again, signing something to Carter. He smiled. Translating, she says Frost remembers. He was there. He saw everything. The old lawyer pulled out his phone, showing the screen to Margaret. And so did David's hidden cameras in your car, the ones you never found, the ones that uploaded to a cloud server you didn't know existed. On the screen, grainy but clear, Margaret dragging an unconscious child from a Mercedes, the timestamp, the location, everything. Margaret's hand holding the gun began to shake violently. That's not admissible. That's... A growl from directly behind her cut off her words. She spun to find a wolf she hadn't noticed, ancient, female. Her yellow eyes clouded with age. Luna, the wolf who'd saved Lena's life that first night. Now almost too old to hunt, but still protective of her adopted pup. The wolf lunged forward and Margaret fired. The bullet never reached Luna. Frost, ancient and arthritic, moved faster than physics should have allowed. The alpha's massive body intercepted the shot meant for his mate, the impact spinning him sideways into the snow. Blood bloomed across his silver-black fur, but he stayed on his feet, yellow eye fixed on Margaret with an intelligence that transcended species. Lena's world shattered. 15 years earlier, age 7. The first time Lena killed, she cried for 3 hours. The rabbit had been old, slower than the others, its white winter coat patchy with age. Frost had herded it toward her, a teaching moment. The pack formed a circle, patient teachers waiting for their strange pupil to understand. She'd used a rock. Quick, messy, necessary. The rabbit's blood on her hands felt like breaking the last thread connecting her to Margaret's world of white tablecloths and proper manners. But her stomach, empty for 2 days, demanded she choose survival over sentiment. Luna showed her how to skin it with sharp stones, how to separate meat from organs. The wolves ate first, pack hierarchy demanded it, but they left her the tender belly meat, the easiest for human teeth to manage. She gagged on the first bite, the metallic taste of raw flesh foreign on her tongue. Frost sat beside her through it all, his presence saying what words couldn't. This is life. This is what we do. You are one of us now. By spring, she could track rabbits through melting snow. By summer, she understood which plants supplemented meat, which mushrooms meant death. Her body adapted faster than any medical text would consider possible, her digestive system learning to process raw meat, her immune system strengthening against parasites that should have killed her. Dr. Carter visited secretly once a month, leaving antibiotics and seizure medication at a designated drop point. He never saw Lena directly. Frost wouldn't allow it, but he knew she lived. The pill bottles always came back empty, marked with tiny teeth indentations that weren't quite human anymore. Age 10. The Grizzly. The bear came during salmon season, when the pack was spread out along the river. 800 pounds of territorial fury, enraged that wolves dared fish in its domain. It charged directly at Lena, who stood frozen in knee-deep water, a half-eaten salmon dropping from her bloody fingers. Frost's impact knocked the bear sideways, his teeth finding its throat. But grizzlies are built for war. One massive paw swept across Frost's face, claws ripping through his left eye, tearing flesh down to bone. The wolf's agonized howl brought the entire pack running, but the bear was already focused back on easier prey, the small, strange cub that smelled wrong. Lena did something then that even she didn't understand. She screamed not in fear, but in fury. The sound that emerged from her scarred throat was neither human nor wolf, but something primal that predated both. It was the sound of every abandoned child's rage-given voice, and it stopped the grizzly mid-charge. The pack attacked as one unit, 16 wolves moving in perfect coordination, hamstringing the bear, wearing it down. But it was Lena who ended it, using a broken branch like a spear, finding the soft spot under its jaw that Frost had exposed with his sacrifice. She spent 3 days cleaning Frost's destroyed eye, using river water and moss, singing the wordless lullabies Luna had taught her. The infection nearly killed him. She stayed awake for 72 hours, forcing water between his teeth, keeping flies from the wound. When his fever finally broke, when his remaining eye focused on her face, he licked her tears away with infinite gentleness. The scar tissue that formed left him half blind, but somehow more magnificent. A warrior's mark, earned defending family. Age 13. The broken leg. Trappers had moved into the territory, setting steel jaw traps along game trails. Frost, teaching the younger wolves to hunt elk, stepped directly onto one. The snap of breaking bone echoed through the forest like a gunshot. Lena found him 3 hours later. The pack circled around their fallen alpha, keening their grief. His left rear leg was shattered, white bone visible through torn muscle. In the wild, this was death. Wolves couldn't survive without running. But Lena wasn't fully wolf. She used her teeth to bite through the trap's chain, freeing him from the anchor. Then, using skills learned from watching Dr. Carter set her own broken arm years ago before Margaret. Before everything went dark, she aligned the bones. Straight branches became splints. Strips of her own clothing, the last remnants of her human past, became bandages. The pack helped carry Frost to the cave, but it was Lena who kept him alive during the 6 weeks of healing. She hunted for him, bringing rabbits she'd killed with her bare hands. She cleaned his wounds, changed his splints, forced him to stay still when instinct demanded he run. She sang to him not words but tones, frequencies that seemed to resonate in his bones, keeping him calm through the worst pain. When he finally stood, when he took his first tentative steps on the healed leg, the entire pack howled in celebration. But Frost only had eyes for Lena, bumping his massive head against her chest in a gesture that among wolves meant one thing: "You are my equal." Age 16. The Beta. The elk was massive, a bull in his prime, 1,200 pounds of muscle and antler. The pack had been tracking him for 3 days, wearing him down, but the kill required precision. One wrong move meant gouging antlers or crushing hooves. Frost was too old now to lead the charge. His damaged eye, his rebuilt leg, they'd slowed him. The pack needed a new hunt leader, and to everyone's surprise, including her own, they looked to Lena. She understood. She could think like prey and predator simultaneously. Her human brain could strategize while her wolf-trained body could execute. She positioned each pack member with hand signals they'd learned to read. Storm on the left flank, River and her yearlings driving from behind, Echo as the distraction. The hunt unfolded like violent poetry. Lena ran alongside wolves, her feet finding purchase on terrain that would challenge mountain goats. When the moment came, when the elk stumbled in river stones, she gave the signal, a whistle that cut through the chaos. The pack brought it down in seconds, clean, efficient, merciful. That night, for the first time, Lena ate before the alphas. Luna and Frost watched with something that looked like pride as their strange adopted daughter took her place as Beta second in command, first in the hunt. Age 18. The wildfire. Lightning struck dry pine in August, and the mountain became hell. The pack scattered, instinct driving them toward water. But Luna's latest litter, 3 pups, only weeks old, were hidden in a den that was now directly in the fire's path. Luna ran back for them, but smoke and heat drove her back. Her howls of anguish pierced through the roar of flames. Lena didn't hesitate. She'd learned to love like a wolf completely, without reservation. Those pups were family. She wrapped wet moss around her face, creating a primitive filter, and plunged into the smoke. The den was an oven. The pups huddled in the deepest corner, mewling in terror. She grabbed one in her teeth the way Luna had taught her and ran. The second trip, her lungs screamed for clean air. The third trip, her hair caught fire, and she rolled in dirt to extinguish it. Pup still clenched in her jaws. When she emerged with the last puppy, fur singed, skin blistered, the entire pack was waiting. Luna approached slowly. Tears, yes. Wolves can cry streaming from her yellow eyes. She took her saved children one by one, then did something unprecedented in wolf hierarchy. She bowed. The alpha female bowed to the human girl who'd become something more. Age 21. This morning, Lena woke in the pre-dawn darkness to Frost's nose against her cheek. His remaining eye held urgency. Danger was coming. Not the random danger of bears or storms, but the deliberate danger only humans brought. She'd dreamed this moment for 15 years. Sometimes she imagined Margaret finding her and finishing what she'd started. Sometimes she imagined herself seeking revenge, leading her pack to Margaret's door. But Frost had taught her patience. The forest remembers. His steady presence seemed to say, "Justice comes to those who wait." She pressed her forehead against his scarred muzzle, breathing in his scent, pine and blood and age and home. Whatever came today, they would face it together, Alpha and Beta, father and daughter in every way that mattered. "I love you," she signed against his fur, knowing he understood not the words but the feeling behind them. His response was a soft whuff of breath, warm against her scarred throat. The same blessing he'd given her that first night when she was 6 and dying. "You are Pack. Pack is forever." Present blood spread beneath Frost's body, turning pristine snow into crimson slush. The bullet had entered just below his shoulder blade, missing his heart but tearing through lung tissue. Each breath bubbled red from the wound. Lena's hands moved frantically, pressing against the hole, trying to stem the flow. Her mouth opened, and for the second time in 15 years, her voice emerged. "No. Not him. Please." The forest held its breath as blood seeped into ancient soil. For 15 years, Margaret Wellington had lived behind a mask of grief, the tragic stepmother who lost her husband and daughter within months of each other. She'd attended charity galas, donated to children's hospitals, even sponsored a yearly memorial scholarship in Lena's name. The community had wrapped her in sympathy, never suspecting they were comforting a would-be child killer. But Dr. Carter had suspected. He'd spent 15 years gathering evidence, protecting a feral girl who signed her testimony in wolf howls, documenting every forged signature and fraudulent sale. He'd risked his career, his reputation, potentially his life, to expose a truth that everyone else had accepted as tragedy. The security footage from David's hidden camera uploaded to a cloud server Margaret never knew existed captured everything: the drugged Coco, the calculated abandonment, the Mercedes turning away as a 6-year-old child lay dying in the snow. One man's paranoia about his wife had become his daughter's salvation, even from beyond the grave. How many of us would have seen the signs Dr. Carter did? Would we have questioned a grieving widow's tears? Would we have spent 15 years secretly visiting drop points in the wilderness, leaving medication for a girl who'd chosen wolves over humans because humans had proven more savage? Most importantly, if you suspected someone in your community had attempted something this heinous, but they were wealthy, connected, respected, would you have the courage to dig for the truth? Or would you, like everyone else in Lena's town, accept the comfortable lie rather than face the uncomfortable truth? What would you have done in Dr. Carter's position?